So friends, I'm exactly in the same place I was there in the morning, and what you see in the background is the red Triumph Scrambler 400X, which has brought me to this place. You can see the flowing lines, the lovely beak that you have up front. It looks actually as if it belongs to the GS family. So if you would like to see more such videos in the future, comparison of bikes, different destinations in and around Bangalore, lovely places that you can do in a day's ride, do subscribe to my channel because we are going to get fresh new content every week.
So today's video is going to be about the segment that has been heating up in the Indian motorcycle market, and that's the 300 to 400cc category. So as a biker, I have also upgraded to this segment over the years. I have been riding motorcycles from almost over for a few decades now, and I started with a 100cc motorcycle, then 150cc, 200cc. Now I ride my G310GS, as all of you know, for the last 1.5 years. It falls in this category, actually 300 to 400cc category. It comes in the segment called the adventure touring segment, and this segment has been becoming very popular of late. Of course, not without a reason. I think it's only justified that this segment has been picking up because of the dual capability of this segment of motorcycle. So they can take off the beaten track from time to time, go off-road on trail rides, and they can also do duties inside the city, and they can also help you with your daily commutes and also take you on that occasional highway ride when you would like to do long distances, covered distances between cities or between towns. So that's why it is a very hot segment, and a lot of bikes have been launched in this segment recently. So the Indian consumer is also upgrading the taste for their motorcycles. And the latest entrant in this segment is, of course, the iconic brand Triumph, which has tied up with Bajaj Auto and launched the twins, that is the Speed 400 and the Scrambler 400X. And also our indigenous Royal Enfield is also not left behind. They have come up with another iconic brand, the Himalayan 452, and I have already done a comparo with my G310GS and the Himalayan, and also with the Scrambler 400X as far as the city commutes are concerned. Because one thing we have to remember is that although we buy these bikes for their off-road creds or probably some of the highway creds that they have owing to their larger displacement machines, most of the time we end up using them, probably 80% of the time, people like us who are working professionals living in cities like Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai or Kolkata, we end up using them for doing city duties, commuting from office on a day-to-day basis. But nonetheless, these bikes are capable for doing more than that, and you can take them on the open highway, and this is what I'm going to talk about today. So how does the G310GS, which is a bike I'm very experienced with because I've done more than 25,000 kilometers on this bike, and I have also covered good distance on my motorcycle, so I have done almost 700-800 kilometers in a day, and it was pretty comfortable, I must say. The saddle is extremely comfortable, and it can take you over long distances without you getting fatigued or you getting exhausted. So that's one of the biggest pros of this bike. But of late I have been kind of getting a little interested about the Scrambler 400X, and I have done a comparo. Actually, the video is up in my channel. You can look out for it, comparing the GS310 and the Scrambler 400X Triumph, basis their creds inside the city, how do they ride inside the city. But today's comparison is going to be specifically about how do they compare when you hit the highway actually. What are the highway manners for these two bikes, and which is the one that you would prefer given the situation that you are in. Of course, our situations are all different. We come from different bikes. We have different kind of affordability, and we have different type of criteria based on which we would select our bike. We are in different age groups, and so one solution does not fit all. So I will try and address all those questions, and I'm going to test ride the Scrambler 400X today. And I must say I should be thankful to Khivraj Bajaj Whitefield for allowing me to allowing me to take a ride on their Scrambler 400X test machine, and I'm going to go there at 8 o'clock today, and I'm going to ride these two vehicles back to back so that I don't have any biases. Just because I own the GS, I'm not going to be in favor of it, and just because the Scrambler is the new kid on the block, I'm not going to be overwhelmingly positive about it. I would like to give an honest opinion about how I feel about these two machines when I ride them back to back, one after the other, because that's when I'm going to best make out how these two machines compare as far as their highway manners are concerned. So riding the GS on the highway, I can tell you the sweet spot for this motorcycle lies between 4 and 6,000 RPM. So after 6,000 RPM, it kind of gets a little vibey. It's not irritatingly vibey, but you will not be comfortable with it. You will try and kind of climb down the rev band, you know. So between 4 and 6,000 RPM, the engine emanates a very nice purr, and that is the time you are doing about 100 to 110 km per hour. So you are doing about 120 km per hour when you are kind of between the rev bands of 7 and 8,000 RPM. And that's also doable, quite easily doable, no matter what who would say. I would say 125 km is not a problem on this bike when you are on a road like this, which is wide open and relatively less traffic on the road. And if you are doing intra-city duties, or if you are into long distance traveling, you will very often encounter this kind of fantastic tarmac. India is not devoid of such tarmac nowadays, I must say. The road infrastructure has significantly improved, so you can do those kind of speeds easily on the GS, 125 km per hour. Can you do more than that? That is not the objective of my video today. Yes, you can do. I have done almost 150 plus km per hour on this bike, but these are not the kind of bikes you would love to do those kind of speeds, because you will be extremely stressed, and the hardware, the brakes, everything does not support those kind of speeds. Those kind of speeds should be done on the superbike category, I would say. So that's not the category we are evaluating today. We are evaluating the very practical segment of 300 to 400 cc motorcycles, which I feel is one of the most practical and utilitarian segments in the Indian motorcycle market today, because they allow you to do your city duties, they allow you to do your daily commutes. At the same time, they can take you off the beaten track if they are of the ADV or the Scrambler format, as these two bikes are from time to time, and help you glide through those broken patches. And they can also do highway duties. So people have done long distances, hundreds and thousands of kilometers on these bikes, and they have been very comfortable.
So friends, as you can see, from whichever angle you can see the flowing lines, the lovely beak that you have up front. It looks actually as if it belongs to the GS family, you know, the bigger GS, the 1250 and the 850. From every angle, it's a beautiful machine, and it's a largish machine, as you can see. So you have the lovely flowing lines, you have the beak in front, you have the braided brake lines, and quality, I would say, is impeccable. I have been using this machine for the last 1.5 years, ridden 25,000 kilometers, and I can tell you that it's at par with some of the best in the world. So you'll have no regrets, barring a few times that I had to change the brake pads. Nothing absolutely went wrong, other than the battery, which was changed free of cost twice actually. But since then, it has not been any problem at all. Lovely machine, isn't it? The looks are fantastic, and one thing that I cannot afford to miss talking about this bike is the ride quality. Whether you are doing speeds of 30 km per hour in the city, or you are doing speeds of 120 km per hour on the highway, you are absolutely comfortable with the kind of ride quality that it offers. And that's why we buy such machines, because when you travel long distances, you pass small towns. At the same time, you also have to take long journeys on the open highway, when the ride quality also becomes extremely important. And it's got a beautiful ride quality, probably one of the best. People say even the new Himalayan, the 452, actually also has a very good ride quality. I have not done a comparative video with it on the highway. I have done one video for the city ride, and I have my views on it. So you can actually watch that video if you'd like to. But look at the flowing lines and the quality of the parts, who will tell that this bike is almost about, year and a half old. It has done 25,000 kilometers. It looks as good as new, and probably it can go on for another few thousand kilometers, maybe 50,000, who knows, 70,000. Nothing is going to go wrong with this bike. So that's what you pay for. That's what, the premium pricing is meant to be for, and you get what you pay for, actually, is what I would like to say when I talk about my GS.
So I am at the Kivraj Triumph showroom in Whitefield, and they have been nice people, to have allowed me to take a longish test ride on the Scrambler 400X, and I've arrived here to get the vehicle and commence on my journey and do the comparo that I intend to do today with my GS and the Scrambler 400X. Here we go.
I'm off to my ride on the proverbial Triumph Scrambler 400X for the compare video. But before we start the journey, it's time that we do a refuel. I don't want to get stuck in the middle of the road, and here we are at the fuel station. Well, I'm quite excited about this ride. So my journey is about to begin. I have to hit the highway. I cannot wait to hit the highway, actually, because I have already tested it within the city limits, the Scrambler 400X. Very simple design layout of the cockpit, nothing exciting, but the moment you start the Scrambler, it gives you a very pleasant sound. You don't have the jitter and the shudder of the GS. That's the first thing you notice on the comparison. The engine sounds more compact, and it feels more sleek. Of course, the GS is built a little more bulkier, probably on purpose, because it kind of makes you feel you are riding a bigger bike than you are actually doing. In the Scrambler, it's just the other way around. So it's a kind of understatement of the power it holds, under the hood. Actually, it's quite a powerful engine, actually, and compared to the GS, it is 6 PS more on horsepower, and that's a significantly more horsepower, and also the cubic capacity. So this is 393 or almost 400 cc, and versus the 313 cc. So almost a 90 cc deficit the GS runs over the Scrambler. But that apart, I think this machine is a little differently built. So in the city, I am actually feeling more comfortable on the Scrambler, of course, and I have been riding the GS for 1.5 years now, and I've got used to it, or probably comfortable with it, but it takes lesser time to get comfortable with the Scrambler, I can tell you, because number one, you can feel the 6 PS difference. It's not earth-shattering, the difference in pickup, but you can also make out that the brakes are sharper over here, and especially the front brake and the rear brake. I have read that it is less sharp than the Speed 400, and on purpose Triumph has done it, because this is meant to have some sort of off-road credentials. That is the reason the front brakes are not that sharp, but compared to the GS, I still find the front brakes are sharp enough. So probably as sharp as the GS, or a little more sharper than that. The suspension in city limits, well, it is not as supple as the GS, is what I can tell you. So if you're looking at a very, comfortable sofa kind of feeling, then you are better off with the GS. Otherwise, if you're looking for a more sporty ride, a more engaging ride in the city limits, I'm still within the city limits, I've not gone on the highway, but I'm guessing it will not be very different on the highway, then we are better off with the Scrambler, is all I can say. And it feels a little more energetic. For example, right now, if you see, I am about at 2000 RPM. I am doing 24 km per hour, and I'm doing about 40 km per hour. So if I shift up, I am on the 5th gear, I'm still doing 40 km per hour, and I'm still on 2000 RPM.
If I shift up on the 6th gear, I am still on 2000 rpm and I'm still doing 40 km/h. This is amazing. My GS is not capable of doing it. So this I've already covered in my earlier video, that if you're looking at this segment of bikes in terms of low speed tractability, you're better off with the Scrambler. So as of now, for the kind of ride I've done, what I can feel is the GS gives you a more sizable or disproportionately large feeling compared to the power that it holds under the hood. This kind of understates the power that it holds, and it kind of gives you a very tractable and very compact feeling when you ride within the city limits. And mistake me not, when you twist open the throttle, there is enough of juice left over here to quickly overtake the fast moving bikes or cars or whatever you face within city limits. So let's hit the highway, the Kolar Expressway, and let's get an opinion, my personal opinion, as to how it will compare, because in the morning itself I had ridden my GS and tested the speeds, higher speeds, not the highest speed. I am against those kind of endeavors, and let's get an idea about how do they compare on the highway and at speeds higher than you can do within the city limits. As we travel, we are almost touching the highway. Let me talk a little bit about the ergos of the bike. So I have been riding the bike for almost 15 minutes, and I have got some initial few impressions of riding on a relatively empty road. It's a Sunday and not so much of traffic actually. The ergos, basically, when you sit on the bike, the position of the handlebar is of course a little on the aggressive side compared to the GS. So if you'd like a more tourer friendly and a more relaxed kind of handlebar position, I think the GS is a better proposition. That's about the handlebar, but maybe you can adjust the position of the handlebar, you can fit in razors, etc. I don't know about that. I'm talking about the stock handlebars over here and the position of the seat. So that's about the handlebars. Now let's talk about the seat per se. Here of course the GS is a clear winner. I am yet to see a seat on an Indian bike which is better contoured and which is better positioned between your legs, to make your ride comfortable for long distances. And that's not an overstatement. That's a very honest statement after having ridden almost 10-12 different, owned almost 10-12 different kinds of bikes in my lifetime. Right. And next, that's about the seating position. The seat itself is relatively narrow compared to the GS. The GS has more substantial seat. Of course, I have fitted the gel seat actually a couple of days back, and that has made the seat even more comfortable. But then I've been riding this bike for over 25,000 kilometers, so the seat has kind of settled in or sagged in a little bit, you can say. So the gel was installed after that period was over. Now coming in, talking about the position of your feet and your riding position, basically your riding triangle, which is very important to enjoy your riding experience. And I think the GS has a more relaxed riding triangle. Of course, these are not cruiser bikes, and they are street bikes. They are made for a kind of a dual purpose objective, and from that perspective, probably this has a more street bias riding triangle compared to the GS. The GS has a more touring bias riding triangle, I would say. So when you are on the highway and cruising for long distances, the GS is a better proposition, slightly better. Now when I'm talking about these differences, these are not huge differences, maybe by just a thin margin is what I would say. And my favorite road, as you know, but this is not the favorite time of the day for me to hit this road. It's quite sunny up there. Bangalore has been kind of devoid of any rainfall for quite some time, and there is water scarcity, and it is getting a relatively parched kind of a terrain nowadays. I hope it rains soon. But till then, this is what you have to make do with. So it's 11 in the morning and I am on the Kolar Expressway, and I am on the Triumph Scrambler 400X, enjoying my ride and comparing it with my ride experience of the G310GS BMW for the last 1.5 years. Well, here you go. So right now I'm cruising at about 60 km per hour because still there is a lot of traffic on the road, and I'm doing about 2000 RPM. I think there is a wide band of speeds that you can do at about below 2000 RPM on this bike. That's a sweet part about this bike. So I think if you're buying it for the purpose of 80% city riding and 20% highway riding, this is a very apt choice at the price point that it is offered. Now I'm going to share my experience about how it feels on the open highway and at what speeds is it really comfortable cruising on the highway. Right. And so currently it's 85 km per hour. I am at about 4000 RPM, and again a lot of traffic. Let me check. So one thing I can tell you about the suspension is it's nice, it's not bad, but compared to the GS it is not that supple, so it won't soak in everything. So for example, when you are crossing a speed breaker and you are saddling and you just get off from the speed breaker, and if you're sitting, then it will kind of send some kind of a bump. It's not a shock, but you would really feel that you have landed. With the GS sometimes, for the smaller landings you will not feel it even, because the suspension is so soft that it kind of absorbs the smaller undulations. But then again, that can become a disadvantage for you when you are doing some kind of a spirited or sporty riding, because then they might feel a little soggy, although I have got used to it so I don't feel it. That's what the experts say, that a very soft suspension is not great for spirited or sporty riding. But then the GS is also great for off-road conditions, I can tell you. So I've taken it to very extreme off-road conditions in Ketanhalli Falls, and it has crossed stones, boulders, slush, everything will aplomb. I think one thing that makes the difference is the tires. I don't know what tires these have, I'll check it out. But the GS has Metzeler Tourance actually, and they're fantastic. Expensive tires, I know that. I think that's where probably Triumph has cut some of the costs, because this is significantly cheaper than the GS. From what I gather, the GS is almost like 3,45,000 on road, 4,45,000 on the road, and this will cost you somewhere around 3.6, 3.7. So that's about 70, 80,000 or 90,000 difference that you pay on the GS, with a deficit in power and with a deficit in cubic capacity. Now that's something you have to consider, whether you are ready to pay. So now there is relatively empty road and I'm picking up pace. So as you can see, right now I'm at 4000 RPM, I'm doing 80 km per hour, and I can do more, but yes, I am on the 6th gear, so this is the top gear. So the revs are climbing. I am going to 7000, 5000, 6000 RPM. So between 4 to 6000, at 6000 RPM my GS does about 100 km per hour, and I think it is almost the same story over here. No? Yes. Let me touch 6000 RPM. So this also does about 100 km per hour. So at 6000 RPM my GS also does 100 km per hour, and this also does 100 km per hour. But this is the sweet spot for my GS, I can tell you. Between the 4 and 6000 RPM, that's a sweet spot for my GS. There is a nice humming power from the engine, as I've told you, and it's a very pleasurable thing to ride the GS between those RPM ranges on an open highway like this. It's a very comfortable cruise. Now obviously your question is, how am I feeling on the Triumph Scrambler 400X at those kind of RPMs? Well, here comes a surprise. Hold on your breath. So I'm climbing the revs 100 km per hour, and it is not very smooth, I can tell you. It is definitely not Honda Smooth, and it is probably similar to my GS. I am at 110 km per hour, and I can see the buzziness, I can feel the buzziness on my hand, on my feet, very similar to my GS. Very similar to my GS. So it's not that it is absolutely smooth, and it's not that my GS is any worse. So there are people, there are reviewers who have been telling all sorts of things about the GS. It's a Vibronics, it's a vibration machine, etc., compared to the speed. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I am cruising at about 100 km per hour, and I can very much feel the vibrations, at least as much as my GS. Of course, it is not the Royal Enfield Classic kind of vibration, where every bone in your body jutters and shudders. It is not that kind of a body vibration, and I'm starting to feel that it probably can do. It is 40 PS of power, speeds more than 100, 120, 130, 140, whatever people have posted on YouTube, but it will not be comfortable at those speeds. I mean, this is best used exactly in the same power range as my GS. So if you keep it within 100 to 110 km per hour, if you keep it within 6000 rpm, max probably 1000 rpm more it can go. So my GS becomes uncomfortable after 6000 rpm, but probably the comfort range is same. Between 6 and 7000 rpm is when the vibrations will start creeping in on the Triumph Scrambler, exactly the same as my GS. But the only thing is the feel of the engine is different. So this feels more compact, and this sounds a little more compact. So I think the characters are different. The GS is definitely not an inferior engine to this, despite its cubic capacity deficit, and despite its displacement deficit, and despite its horsepower and torque deficits. But definitely this bike is a capable bike. So I think that's a fair bit of highway riding experience I have shared with you, and now 80 km per hour. Let me increase the revs. 100, 110, 120. Very nice. It climbs faster than the GS, I can tell you. It reaches 120 faster, but there are vibrations. You will not be comfortable riding this bike above 120 km per hour. There is significant amount of vibration that creeps in, and you will try to shift down, and you will try to lower the revs the moment you go past 120 km per hour. It's exactly the same feeling as my GS. So in the morning I was riding my GS at 125 km per hour. I had also touched 130, but probably it is the same kind of feeling. In fact, I would say that beyond 120 km per hour, the GS is less vibration. The GS has less vibration than the Scrambler. That is my personal opinion. Of course, I don't know if there is an instrument to measure vibrations actually literally at those speeds. If it was there, I would love to have it, but that's my own personal feeling. To take this bike exactly at the same place, I went in the morning with my GS, and of course it's a little sunny right now, and on the same road. This is some kind of an off-road, a semi-off-road kind of experience. It is not tarmac, and as you can see, even the Triumph Scrambler is pretty comfortable on this kind of a road. So this is the lake. In the morning there was a beautiful rising sun. Right now you don't have it. It's a kind of a aggressive sun that you have over the head right now. But nonetheless, it is the very same place. I was there in the morning, and here I will go for a halt, give it a pause, and take a good look at the Scrambler.
So friends, I'm exactly in the same place I was there in the morning, and what you see in the background is the red Triumph Scrambler 400X, which has brought me to this place. It's a little sunny right now, not a problem. I enjoyed the ride actually. The more the thing I enjoyed more is basically comparing the Scrambler to my GS 310, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Of course, the verdict, or my opinion, not the verdict, I would say my opinion would come at the end of this video, where I'm going to talk about who should go for this bike and which bike and in which condition, and what are the prerequisites that will kind of let you decide which bike you should go for, whether you should switch from one to another or not, etc., etc. Today in 2024, things change relevance as time passes because new models come in the market, upgrades are done to bikes. So the GS is due for an upgrade. It's been almost 5 years in the market, the G310GS, and I'm sure that they will bring in some upgrades to the engine or the hardware. But as of now, does it make sense over the Triumph Scrambler 400X or not? That's what I'm going to talk about. But before that, I will let you have a good look at the Scrambler 400X. A beautiful machine it is, a beauty in its own terms. There you go. It's a beautiful location. As you can see, there's beautiful water body, the nice mountains, the hills, the Kolar Hills in the background. One of my favorite destinations whenever I come to Bangalore and when I come for a ride towards Kolar side actually. If I'm unable to go in a very distant location, this is the place I come to. It's a handsome looking machine, very classic looking machine. The design language is quite different. They're as different as chalk and cheese is what I would say. The GS and the Scrambler 400X. Probably they serve similar kind of a purpose. City ride as well as an occasional highway run. That's the same purpose that they serve, but the similarities end at that because they look very different. This is a very compact looking machine. There are very little panel gaps, fantastic build quality. I think it's built for the international market, and so is the GS. You can make out from both these machines. But what is great about this machine is that it comes at a significantly lower price point, at least at this point of time. Almost 60, 70, 80,000 lower than the GS. The current price in Bangalore I'm talking about, where taxes are a little high and probably it is the most expensive in the country to own a motorcycle. But this is a very, very handsome looking machine. If you see the kind of a finish it has on the headlight grille, the panels around the speedometer, the handlebar, basically it is almost similar to my GS. It is no less, I would say. The brake lines, braided brake lines, fantastic. The golden fox, very, very similar to the GS in more compact dimensions is what I would say. I would not compare the two basically because they follow a very different design language, and the purpose and the audience for which they are built is probably a little different. When they approached, when the designers in these two great companies actually approached designing these bikes, this looks like a very classic Triumph Scrambler, and the GS looks like a very classic BMW GS, the bigger GS I would like to mention. But of course, it's quite evident that they belong to the same genre actually, as to their bigger siblings, and the double barreled exhaust, the aluminium finish on the engine bay and the exhaust pipe, it's fantastic. The tires, they look fantastic. They are MRFs basically. I think the GS is a little better endowed over here with the Metzlers. You could make it out with the grip levels that they were offering on the highway as well as within the city limits, I think. But they are doing a fair bit of good job, I would say. The MRFs don't disappoint you at all, but in case you are more aggressive and you would like to have a better riding experience, you can always upgrade to a Pirelli or a Metzeler set of rubber for your bike. But here's a visual treat for the bike. Have a good look. So friends, here we are with the Scrambler 400X. I'm just done with my cup of coffee and kind of refreshed. So now I'm going to share my opinion about the difference between riding these two bikes on the highway, the Scrambler 400X and my GS 310. And let me tell you who should be buying this bike and who should not be buying this bike actually. So to start with, what happens if you are an existing GS owner like me? So that's an important question. Should you upgrade to the Scrambler? For the highway riding conditions, especially I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the riding conditions within city limits. For that there is a different video, and my verdict at the end of that video was no. And what is the consideration after having ridden in the highway? So my answer here is, I will come to the answer first, is no, and then I'll tell you the reason why I am saying so. Okay, so I am saying so purely from a consideration that there is not much of an upgrade that you will face if you actually ride the two bikes back to back, and that's the conclusion you are going to reach. The reason being that both the bikes are very good when it comes to doing about 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, or even going to 110 kilometers per hour. You can probably stretch it to about 120 kilometers per hour, but beyond that they have a very similar kind of feel. So there are vibrations, significant amount of vibrations. I mean, they will not unsettle you. Probably you can do speeds of 140. Probably you can do a little easily on the Scrambler compared to the GS, but actually it's not a zone where you will be comfortable, because above 120 there are vibrations that will creep on your feet, on your foot pegs, on your handlebars, etc., and you will feel that I should go down on the revs and settle down at a lower speed, at a lower rev range. And this is exactly the feeling you will get on the GS as well as on the Scrambler. So that is the reason I wouldn't suggest switching from the GS to the Scrambler if you're already owning a GS. The BS6 version, I haven't ridden the BS4 version. I have heard that it had significantly more vibrations, but the BS6 version is not more vibey than the Scrambler at speeds above 120 km per hour, and both of them can do speeds above 120 km per hour. They can touch 140 easily, probably go a little beyond that. Scrambler probably will do about 10 km per hour more than that at the top end, but you don't ride this kind of bikes or this segment of bikes to do those kind of speeds. Yeah, you shift to a higher segment. So for the vibrations above 120 km per hour, I will not suggest switching from the GS to the Scrambler. So that is the first segment of customers who are already owning GS. Now I am coming to the segment of customers who are buying the bikes for the first time. Does it make sense for them to go for the GS, or does it make sense to go for the Scrambler for highway riding conditions? Again, I would like to repeat, for riding conditions within the city limits, check out my other video. That's a detailed review of the city riding conditions of both the bikes. So if you are going for the first bike in this category in your lifetime, probably I will suggest you go for the Scrambler. The reason is that it has got a better sound feel, and it is better within a little better, shade better than the GS within city limits, because of the nimbleness and because of the kind of sound that emanates from this engine. It feels a little more compact in dimensions. But then if you are a person with a little larger proportion, okay, probably you are on the higher side of 80 or whatever, you will probably prefer the GS. Or if you are a person with a taller stance, you will probably prefer the GS because it gives you a big bike feel, which this bike doesn't give you actually. Of course, mistake not, because this bike actually weighs 10 kilos more than the GS, as I said. So it is heavier and it feels little more planted on the highway than the GS, but the GS is also capable of offering a very fantastic ride. In fact, in terms of ride quality, the GS would score probably 8 upon 10, and this will probably score 6 or 7 is what I would say. So this is about the second category of buyers. Now coming to the third category of buyers. So if you are owning any other bike in this segment, for example, or probably you are coming from a lower segment. If you are buying something like the X-Pulse, for off-road, you love off-roading actually, and you would like to use your bike for occasional highway runs, some city run and occasional off-road runs also. In that case, which is the bike that you would choose? Of course, I will do a detailed off-roading review, but as of now, my consideration has been that the GS is probably more comfortable doing an off-road trail rather than the Scrambler. The reason is that it has got a little harder suspension, and if you want a comfort oriented ride or you want to feel more plush on the off-road sections, probably the GS will be better because it will give you that kind of a ride feel. The Scrambler will not, because once again it is a Scrambler, it is not an adventure vehicle, they don't claim to be one, and it is not meant to take the kind of beating the GS is meant to take actually. In fact, the GS I have seen in the international market, you can do modifications that actually turns it into an extreme off-roader. But unfortunately, I feel that those modifications are not available in our country, but I would love to go for them whenever they are actually. So, if you're coming from a smaller off-roading bike and off-roading is your criteria, probably you'll be better off with the GS. Now, what are the advantages you get with the GS? You get a better, more comfortable ride, you get a bigger seat, you get a bigger bike feel. Probably it looks a little better than the Scrambler. This looks classy. The design language is different. I wouldn't compare them, as I said. But nonetheless, if you talk in terms of visual appeal, which will catch eyeballs if they stand side by side, I think the GS, even after 5 years of being there in the market, will catch more eyeballs than the Scrambler. This has got a very diminutive demeanor, basically, what I would say. And these are the reasons. Probably you will prefer the GS for the ergonomics. It will offer you a better and more comfortable long distance touring capability, the GS, than the Scrambler. The reason is that it has got a softer suspension, and not only that, it has got bigger seats, more accommodating seats, and it can take more beating than the Scrambler when it comes when it comes to undulations on the road. So that's my 2 cents on who should buy which bike and under what situation. Now coming to the price point. So all these factors what I've spoken is right now based on the consideration that they appear on the same price point, but they are not. So Triumph and BMW both are extremely big names, famous names globally, as you know. One is German and the other is British, and as you can see that both have got nice creds under their belly from an international reputation point of view, and there is no reason why you should pay 60, 70, 80,000 more for the GS at this point of time for that little better ride quality, but for a lesser amount of bang for the buck that you are getting. I mean, in terms of horsepower and in terms of displacement, probably you get less on the GS. You get better tires, you get better ride quality, you get better highway feel, but those are again nitpicking. The differences are not so stark that you will really switch from one to another. But that's my opinion. Tell me what you feel about my opinion and whether you feel I'm right and wrong, or what has been your personal experience if you have ridden both the bikes. I would also love to hear from the audience and not just share my opinion about these 2 bikes and their highway capabilities. So if you would like to see more such videos in the future, comparison of bikes, different destinations in and around Bangalore, lovely places that you can do in a day's ride, do subscribe to my channel, because we are going to get fresh new content every week and stay updated to the places that I visit and the bikes that I ride. And if you are a motorhead or a petrol head like me, I would really encourage you to subscribe to my channel, because it will cost you nothing, but it will provide you some amount of entertainment about the things that you are passionate about, like me, riding motorcycle.